All right, if you're in Texas, listen up. The state's rulebook just got a major refresh. A whole wave of new laws just kicked in, and believe me, they're set to change a little bit of everything, from how we do business to public safety. Let's get into it. And I'm not talking about a few small tweaks here and there. Nope. We're talking about more than 30 new state laws that are officially on the books. It's a pretty big overhaul to the legal landscape. But hey, who has time to dig through all that legal speak, right? That's what we're here for. We're going to cut through the noise and break down the 6 most important new laws, the ones that are really going to have an impact on your day-to-day life. So here's our game plan. First, we'll hit the new safety and enforcement laws. Then, we're going to look at a huge tax break for businesses. After that, we'll explore some new rules for tech and for schools. And then we'll wrap it all up and talk about what it all means for you. Okay, first up, safety and enforcement. We're going to look at 2 really key laws here that change how law enforcement deals with immigration and how property rights work. So, before we jump into the first law, we need to know this term, a 287G agreement. What is that? Well, in simple terms, it's basically a partnership that lets trained local law enforcement officers help out federal agents with immigration enforcement. And here's the kicker. With Senate Bill 8, it makes these agreements mandatory for most county jails across Texas. So as you can see, this means trained local deputies can now question inmates about their immigration status and even directly assist federal ICE agents. Now, as you can probably guess, this law is pretty controversial. Supporters say it's a great way to improve public safety and make sure federal and local teams are working together. But on the other hand, critics are really worried it could lead to racial profiling and break down the trust between communities and the police, which might make people afraid to report crimes. Okay, moving on to the second law in this section, and this one's all about property. It's called Senate Bill 38, and its whole purpose is to make the eviction process way faster for what it calls unauthorized occupants, what people often call squatters. And wow, this timeline really shows you just how much faster we're talking. Now, a property owner can give a standard notice, and a court hearing has to be scheduled in just 10 to 21 days. And right after that hearing, the eviction can move forward. So this really cuts both ways. For property owners, it's a huge relief, a much faster way to get back control of their property. But there's a real concern from tenant advocates that this could put legitimate tenants at risk, that they could get pushed out too fast in a dispute without having enough time to prove they have a right to be there. All right, let's switch gears and move on to our second section, a big break for business. This one is all about a major change to business property taxes that's going to leave a lot more money in the hands of business owners. Okay, so the law is House Bill 9, and here's the core of it. We're talking about the tax on business property, things like inventory, machinery, computers, furniture, you name it. Under this new rule, businesses will not pay a dime of local property tax on the first $125,000 worth of that stuff. Now, to get a sense of just how big a deal this is, let's look at the old number. Before, the exemption was only for the first $2,500, a tiny fraction. And now, boom, it's jumped from $2,500 all the way up to $125,000. I mean, that is a massive tax cut, especially for those small and mid-sized businesses that rely on a lot of equipment or carry a lot of inventory. But, of course, there are 2 sides to this coin. For small businesses, it's a clear win, major tax relief. But for local governments, well, they rely on that tax revenue. A potential loss of income could mean tough decisions down the road, maybe budget cuts for things like schools or parks. Okay, on to our final section, and this one is all about the future. We're talking new rules for technology and for our schools, covering everything from artificial intelligence to how we test our kids. So with House Bill 149, Texas is really trying to get ahead of the curve on AI. It sets up a state council to figure out policy, and it puts some clear guardrails in place. For instance, companies have to tell you when you're dealing with an AI. It also bans using AI for things like discrimination or collecting your biometric data, like a face scan, without your permission. It's all about trying to balance innovation with safety. Next, in the world of tech, we have the App Store Accountability Act. The whole point of this law was to protect kids online. It was supposed to make app stores, like Apple's or Google's, verify a user's age before a minor could download an app or buy something inside one. But there's a huge plot twist here. This law has been put on pause. A federal judge has temporarily blocked it, saying it likely violates the First Amendment.
The reasoning is that forcing age verification on everyone could actually restrict free speech for both adults and kids. So for right now, this law is stuck in legal limbo.
And finally, let's talk education. House Bill 8 is a complete game changer for standardized testing. For years, it's been all about that one single, super high-stakes STAR test at the end of the school year. Well, that's gone. The new model replaces it with 3 shorter tests spread out over the course of the year. So why the big change? Well, the goal is pretty straightforward, to take some of the pressure off. That one big test created so much stress for students and for teachers. The hope is that by testing throughout the year, you get a much better, more accurate picture of how a student is actually doing. Okay, wow, we have covered a ton of ground, haven't we? So let's take a second, bring it all home, and do a quick recap of what these big changes really mean for you. So here it is, all in one place. On immigration, local jails are now officially helping federal enforcement. On taxes, businesses get a massive property tax exemption. For property, there's a much faster eviction process. In tech, we've got a new AI rulebook, but that App Store law is on hold. And in education, it's the end of the line for the single big test, replaced by smaller ones throughout the year. When you step back and look at it all, these laws really do touch on almost every part of life, from policing and the economy to AI and our kids' education. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Of all these changes, which one do you think is going to have the biggest, most lasting impact on the future of Texas?